Hey, my name is Priscilla, and what's happening to me right now? I still can't wrap my head around it. All I know is that things went horribly wrong the moment I decided to spend a weekend in that cursed cabin. I thought I was doing the right thing escaping after my breakup, getting some much-needed alone time, but I had no idea I was stepping into something far worse than a bad relationship. And now I'm not sure if I'll make it out of this alive. Let me take you back to the beginning. The breakup with Jason hit me like a freight train. We'd been together for 3 years, and in my mind, I thought we were rock solid. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but I never saw the end coming. The truth blindsided me. Jason had been cheating on me. The betrayal was like a knife in my gut. All the fights we'd had over the last few months suddenly made sense. The defensiveness, the lies, the constant late-night work meetings. When it all came out, I felt like my world was caving in. I was so angry, so hurt, but mostly I was lost. My best friend Liz was the only one who managed to pull me out of my spiral. She told me I needed a break, that I should get away and clear my head, far away from all the memories of Jason and everything we'd built together. She found this cabin online somewhere secluded in the woods, totally off the grid, where I could focus on myself and get some peace and quiet. At first, the idea sounded perfect. I mean, what could be better than a weekend alone to cry it out, scream into the wilderness, and just be completely detached from the world? I needed solitude, and this place seemed to offer exactly that. So I booked it without a second thought. The pictures made the cabin look rustic but charming, surrounded by towering pine trees with no neighbors for miles. A cozy little retreat, the listing had said, but the reality was something entirely different. The drive to the cabin was longer than I expected. The rental was way out in the middle of nowhere. No surprise there. After driving for hours on narrow, winding roads, I finally turned off onto a gravel path that led even deeper into the woods. My GPS had lost signal miles ago, and I was relying on the printed directions Liz had given me. The deeper I drove into the forest, the more the trees seemed to close in around me. It felt like they were watching me, standing taller and darker as I ventured farther away from civilization. I hadn't passed another car or house in what felt like hours. There was nothing, just me, the road, and the endless line of trees. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was already sinking low in the sky. The first thing that struck me was how isolated it felt. No sounds of birds, no rustling leaves, just dead, eerie silence. The cabin itself stood at the end of the narrow dirt path, small and shabby compared to the charming pictures I'd seen online. Its wood was weathered, almost rotting, and the windows were grimy, making it look like it had been abandoned for years. I pulled up next to the cabin and turned off the engine. The quiet was oppressive. It pressed in on me from all sides. I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach, but I told myself it was just nerves. After all, I had come here to be alone, right? I grabbed my bags from the back seat, glancing around as I did. The cabin was surrounded by dense forest, trees stretching high into the sky, their tops swaying in the faint breeze. But there was something off about the woods, something unsettling. The trees seemed unnaturally tall, their branches knotted and twisted like crooked fingers reaching for the sky. I shook off the unease, chalking it up to exhaustion from the long drive. The cabin's front porch creaked under my weight as I stepped up to the door. The key was hidden under a loose brick, just as the rental instructions had said. I unlocked the door and pushed it open, greeted by a wave of musty air. The interior of the cabin was even smaller than I had imagined. A single room with a kitchenette on one side, a stone fireplace in the corner, and a rickety-looking staircase leading up to a loft where the bedroom was. The furniture was old and covered in dust, and the air inside felt thick, like the cabin had been sealed shut for years. But it didn't matter. I wasn't here for luxury. I was here to get away. I spent the next hour unpacking and settling in. I cleaned up a bit, opened the windows to let in some fresh air, and tried to get comfortable. As the sun set, I lit a fire in the fireplace to keep the chill away and poured myself a glass of wine. The warmth of the fire was comforting, and for the first time in days, I felt myself beginning to relax. I curled up on the couch with a book and tried to lose myself in its pages. That's when I heard the first sound. It was subtle at first, just a creak, like the cabin was settling. No big deal, right? It was an old building after all, but then I heard it again, louder this time, and it didn't sound like the house was settling. It sounded like footsteps. I froze, listening carefully. The creaking continued, slow and deliberate, coming from above. My pulse quickened. Was there someone in the loft? My thoughts raced. Had someone broken in? Was I not as alone as I thought? Gripping the fireplace poker, I crept toward the staircase. I hesitated at the bottom, staring up into the darkness of the loft. The creaking had stopped, but I could still feel the weight of something or someone up there. My hand trembled as I slowly made my way up the stairs, each step creaking beneath me. When I reached the top, the loft was empty. The bed was untouched, the quilt neatly draped over it, and the windows were closed. There was no sign of anyone. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I told myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe the floorboards were just old and warped. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but it lingered, gnawing at the back of my mind. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those creaks again. The sound of footsteps pacing back and forth, as if someone was walking through the cabin, watching me from the shadows. I kept telling myself it was all in my head, that it was just the old building playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The next morning, I woke up feeling groggy and disoriented. The fire had gone out during the night, and the cabin was freezing cold. My muscles ached from tossing and turning, and my mind was clouded with exhaustion. I was tempted to pack up and leave right then and there, but something stopped me. Maybe it was pride, or maybe I just didn't want to admit that I was scared. I had come here to clear my head, and I wasn't about to let some creaky old house ruin that. I spent the day outside hiking through the woods. The fresh air helped clear my mind, and for a few hours I managed to push the strange events of the night before to the back of my mind. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, that same sense of dread started creeping back in. I hurried back to the cabin, locking the door behind me as soon as I stepped inside. The fire crackled in the hearth, and I tried to focus on the simple things: making dinner, reading my book, staying warm. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That's when I noticed the journal. It was lying on the kitchen table, as if someone had placed it there just for me to find. I hadn't seen it before, and I certainly hadn't brought it with me. The cover was old and worn, the pages yellowed with age. My heart raced as I picked it up, flipping through the pages. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic, and the entries were short, disjointed. This place isn't safe. The sounds, they're coming from the walls. I hear him every night watching me. I tried to leave, but I couldn't. He won't let me. I dropped the journal, my hands trembling. This had to be some kind of joke, right? A prank left behind by the last guest to scare whoever stayed here next. But it didn't feel like a joke. The air in the cabin had shifted. The silence was no longer just silence. It was thick, oppressive, filled with something I couldn't see but could definitely feel. And then the footsteps started again. This time they were louder, more deliberate, echoing through the cabin like someone was walking right outside the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed the poker again, my knuckles white as I held it tightly. The footsteps continued, circling the cabin, getting closer and closer until they stopped right outside the front door. I stood there, frozen, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The footsteps stopped and the silence returned. I didn't sleep at all that night. By the third day, I was unraveling. The sleepless nights, the strange sounds, the journal I couldn't take anymore. I packed up my things, ready to get the hell out of there. I didn't care about getting my money back. I just needed to leave.